The Wraiths in a conflict. The world lay in shambles, the remnants of Kade's most recent plan to tear down a city that had once mocked his very existence. As dusk settled, dark clouds reflected the fires below, casting an eerie glow over the streets, where people scattered like shadows, desperate to escape his wrath. Standing atop a building overlooking the chaos, Kade watched it all unfold with a quiet satisfaction. This was his masterpiece, his vengeance against those who had wronged him. But as he looked upon the destruction, a strange emptiness crept into his heart. He could remember every slight, every rejection, every humiliation that had driven him to this point. They had fueled him for years, pushing him to become the Wraith, the feared villain whose name alone could silence a room. Yet tonight, as he stood in the midst of his victory, he felt the hollow echo of something he hadn't anticipated: doubt. A faint voice, almost like a whisper, surfaced within him. Is this really what you wanted? The thought vanished as quickly as it came, pushed aside by Kade's years of hatred and resolve. He had dedicated himself to vengeance, to proving to the world that he was a force to be reckoned with, not someone to be tossed aside. He hardened his gaze, reminding himself of his purpose, his power, and the sense of control he had fought so hard to obtain. But then, just as he turned to leave, a flash of movement caught his eye. Below, among the rubble, a young girl huddled by a fallen pillar, her wide eyes staring up at him with a mixture of fear and fascination. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, her face smeared with soot, clutching a torn piece of cloth in her hands. Kade's instinct was to ignore her, to walk away and let her be swallowed by the ruins he had created. But something held him back. The girl's gaze was unwavering, her innocence piercing through the darkness surrounding him. Kade found himself rooted to the spot, unable to look away. For a moment, he imagined what her life might have been before all of this. Perhaps she had friends, a family, maybe even dreams that would now never come to pass because of him. With a frustrated growl, he tore his gaze from her, forcing himself to leave. But as he disappeared into the shadows, the image of her frightened face lingered, a small spark igniting something he couldn't quite understand. 2 days later, Kade's mind was restless. He had moved on to his next hideout, where he usually found peace in solitude. But now, all he could think of was the girl's face, the unspoken accusation in her eyes, and the question that had slithered into his thoughts that night. It ate at him, corroding the ironclad armor he had built around his mind. Why did he care? He had seen countless faces look at him in fear, but none had stayed with him like this. He was the Wraith, the destroyer of peace, the man who had turned his pain into power. But the unease continued to fester, like a wound he couldn't ignore. Kade decided he needed a distraction. He would put his energy into planning his next move, one that would silence this nagging voice once and for all. With a swipe of his hand, he summoned the blueprints of the city's central power grid onto his screen, mapping out his next course of destruction. He convinced himself that this was the only path forward. Yet, as he plotted, he couldn't escape the flicker of doubt. And though he had always dismissed such thoughts before, this time, they refused to leave him.